Hello, I am Bookface, and I am descending into a cave of bad decisions. Today, we're discussing the mysterious creatures from the movie The Descent, known simply as the Crawlers. So, the movie doesn't really claim these things are from any mythology or folklore, but their unexplained presence seems to imply they've been there a while, and the little teaser stuff from the sequel also seems to imply that locals are at least somewhat aware of these creatures' existence. This at least implied that depth enough for me to hyperfixate on it for a bit and eventually find a decent match in mythology. That and the fact I just really wanted to make a video about this movie. With all that out of the way, let's jump right in. Woo! How am I still falling? Aside from the tragic Final Destination type beginning, the biggest horror in this movie are the cave-dwelling creatures, and adrenaline junkies who don't consider the consequences of their actions. Looking at you, Juno. The cave system they mention by name is called the Borum Caverns, and despite this being a place in England, the movie is actually set in the lower part of the Appalachians, North Carolina. So even though it was actually some unknown cave, it was actually just a bunch of really impressive set design, we do have a general location. Another noteworthy detail is that while it doesn't reference the creatures, these caves have ancient paintings in them, which may be from people or even the crawlers themselves. I don't know. Never asked if they had an art degree. That's why they went to live in the caves, because they can't get a job with their art degree. I'm allowed to make these jokes. I'm an artist. I can be sad with them. These creatures are pale humanoids with butt-ugly faces. And notably fangs that look like a vampire bat's. Also some barely there eyes that make it absolutely no surprise to learn they are completely blind.
Hey, my glasses!
I can't see without them!
Also, despite their strong resemblance to humans, they are totally animalistic, though they may have some kind of echolocation used for communicating as well as navigating. It's not particularly clear. They aren't exactly the most organized bunch, and again, neither are people. They do have a communal pooping hole. That shows some kind of society, I guess. My first guess was a simple one, that being the melon heads, which I've talked about in depth in another video, which is code for me saying I'm lazy and just want to summarize here. Some obvious comparisons is that they're very human-like monsters from the US with mutated features and bald heads. They usually hunt at night and make high-pitched screams when attacking people, which of course fits well with our mutant cave-dwelling bat people who like screaming. However, even though there are some obvious comparisons, there are also some very obvious issues, such as the crawlers don't have the disproportionately large heads that give melon heads their name. And while melon heads stick to the shadows, there's no version I could find that says they're actually blind. Also, melon heads are usually further north than North Carolina, and their origins are far too modern for these potentially ancient creatures. Also, melon heads are the size of a child, and crawlers are the size of full-grown adults. So while the melon heads do match some features, it's only in the most broad sense, and looking even a little bit deeper causes everything to fall apart, like my mental well-being. Anyways, next we have one that seems very obvious, but is actually very complicated. That would be the pale crawlers, which by simple word association seems like a perfect match. Normally I love choosing the option so simple that it totally minimizes the amount of thinking I need to do. I don't want smart modes to overheat again like last video.
He never thinks. Why did he make me think so much that video? He is totally unprepared for thinking.
But we're still going to look a little deeper, since that's the whole point of this video. So pale crawlers are cryptids, big air quotes on that, or actual quote since I'm writing it on the screen, described as humanoids with long, lanky limbs. They attack and eat people, which certainly fits the predatory nature of the crawlers. They most often crawl around on all fours, hence the name, but can walk around on two legs. We lose the blindness and instead just have a prominent eye shine, which, saying it out loud, is not even remotely the same thing, but I just had to mention it, and it's about eyes. Despite the closeness of that connection, there are still plenty of issues. No story I found of pale crawlers specifically mentions a cave, and the story is even more modern than melonheads. I haven't got a perfect idea of the origin, but I think the pale crawlers is just a term to classify any online sighting resembling the rake. It's like the species that the rake belongs to, which is part of the reason I'm so hesitant to really call it a cryptid. Maybe I'll look into that in the future, but it sounds complicated. In fact, this origin is so modern that I think we run into a bit of a chicken or the egg situation, since The Rake and this movie both came out in the early 2000s. Frankly, I think it's fairly likely that the crawlers inspired the cryptid more than the other way around. And finally, after really locking into my research, I found the Moon-Eyed People of Cherokee myth. Interestingly, this is another example of the very specific myth phenomena I've noticed of monsters that are also just believed to be another people group, this being the case with the Rougarou and the Burbalang. The Moon-Eyed People were thought to have lived in modern-day North Carolina and Georgia in the southern Appalachians, and supposedly predated the Cherokee. This, of course, is a perfect match in terms of location, and helps with time frame since there are also prehistoric structures and statues associated with the Moon-Eyed People, much like the ancient cave paintings in the movie. They were often referred to as albinos with blonde hair and large blue eyes, and they were generally thought to be smaller and fatter compared to others, frequently with long beards. So the albinism is a good match, though the rest is pretty off. Want a re-edit of the movie, but all the crawlers have goatees, or just really, really long wizard beards.
You shall not pass!
Unless you're willing to say that the blue eyes are just cataracts, which would kind of fit, honestly, with this next bit. They were referred to as moon-eyed since it was thought they could see better at night than in the day, and another version even specifically says they see poorly in light, and this is another perfect fit for the crawlers. Editing Bookface to call my past self stupid. It is not, in fact, a perfect match since the crawlers are fully blind, not just creatures with bad vision. Just wanted to point that out. Also, again, fits my random cataract justification since brightness causes major vision issues with cataracts, while low light mostly causes some minor stuff. Of course, that is according to like 2 minutes of Googling. I don't know a lot about cataracts. I just know it makes for a good visual in my drawing. They're thought to live in dense woods or in secluded caves, and do I even really need to explain how perfectly that fits since the crawlers live in a cave system in the middle of the woods? What makes it most fascinating to me, though, is the fact that eventually the Moon-Eyed People were kicked out by other tribes for the sake of peace, and most stories specifically say they were driven away rather than killed. Of course, to be fair, despite the Moon-Eyed People being driven out for peace, apparently, they were never described as being dangerous or animalistic or anything like that. They didn't even mention conflict. It just says for peace. It's kind of weird. But with all that, here's my complete theory.
A game theory.
No, I think this would be a film theory, actually.
A film theory.
So my idea is that in this world, the Moon-Eyed People were driven off by other tribes and escaped into the cave system to hide. At the higher levels, continue to do their typical thing by making cave paintings. Over time though, potential inbreeding and just a harsh environment, they change into very different creatures. Their light sensitivity over time develops into total blindness, and their desperation to survive in a place that probably doesn't have a lot of food could have led them to lose their humanity altogether and become more like animals than people. And thus caps off my headcanon lore that I pulled out of nowhere in particular. So, are the crawlers from the descent the Moon-Eyed People of Cherokee myth? Maybe. Probably not, if I'm being honest. The directors of this movie wanted to make cave monsters. A lot of the features of the crawlers are just very typical for underground creatures in general, especially if they're living in total darkness, such as a lack of pigmentation, underdeveloped or non-existent vision, echolocation, and don't forget they had some serious bat teeth, which could probably mean they were taking more animal inspiration than myth inspiration. I could easily see this being a bunch of coincidental similarities, but it is interesting how much of it does fit. And there we have some possible real-life identities for the crawlers. I love horror movies, especially creature features, and The Descent is honestly a classic that I'm really glad I could talk about. Also, I couldn't think of where to fit this in the video, so I'll just point out here that I think it's really funny how the adulterer of the movie is named Juno, since Juno is the Roman goddess of marriage and wedding vows, equated to Hera. I really hope that was intentional. If you like this video and want to support me and make weird stuff, I have a Patreon. You can sign up for free to see hobby drawings of mine. $1 a month will get you access to these weird little extra things and videos, like this thing. Goofy, ain't it? And also let you vote on future videos. And for $5, you get access to little bits and pieces of my drawings that you can combine into horrific monsters, like this friend-shaped fella. With all that done, I'll see you next time. Bye!